Welcome to Mindly Way, where we explore life philosophies to grow and find the right path. Get ready to listen for an inner journey. The fabled Chinese hermit Xu Yu once observed a mole sipping water from a pond. Then it dawned on him that the mole only drinks as much as it needs when it's thirsty, neither more nor less. The mole doesn't burden itself with excesses, because doing so would only make it more difficult for it to move. In contrast to humans, who frequently have a tendency to consume far more than they actually need. While we might not consume excessive amounts of water, we frequently overindulge in material goods, purchasing far more than what is necessary for our survival. There is a cost to consumerism as well, because it takes resources to stay up with other consumers. Because of this, a lot of people are prepared to work themselves into an early grave in order to simply amass extensions of themselves, that is, extensions of their egos. They often believe that I have more, so I am more, so as their possessions increase, so does their sense of self. However, there is a movement known as minimalism that opposes the consumerist culture in which we currently reside. Individuals who choose to live with nothing more than what is necessary and reject excessive consumption are known as minimalists. In addition to being a popular lifestyle trend today, minimalism is a concept that has been applied for ages. Numerous sages and philosophers have felt a sense of freedom from owning little and living simply throughout history. They realize that our identity is not defined by our belongings, and that our constant pursuit of material goods keeps us from living life to the fullest. This video looks at the philosophical aspects of minimalism, examining why less is more and more is less, as well as why wealth is the capacity to let go. Mistaken minimalism. Diverse interpretations exist for minimalism. Essentially, it emphasizes simplifying our lives, cutting back on unnecessary things, and not pushing ourselves too far. Put another way, to make things easy. However, there are some minimalist approaches that fall short. There is extreme asceticism first, which aims to live below the bare minimum. For instance, Prince Siddhartha Gautama was an ascetic who consumed just 1 grain of rice per day and had almost no flesh remaining on his bones. Consuming less than one needs is somewhat minimalistic, since it hardly necessitates consumption. Such a lifestyle also entails giving up material belongings, which results in a simple existence. However, less really is more in the case of the extreme ascetic, because excess is a path towards self-destruction. Siddhartha Gautama came to the conclusion that physical punishment is ineffective for achieving enlightenment. Therefore, he gave up his austere way of life before becoming the Buddha. Secondly, there is an affluent, stylish version of minimalism that emphasizes getting rid of extraneous and frequently cheap items while keeping a few high-end pieces. For instance, a $2 million apartment with a minimalist living room. Here, minimalism is still employed to flaunt wealth, since the lack of inexpensive, outdated items highlights the pricey items we do own. Since status and belongings are still important, we can view this as a sophisticated form of consumerism, because it still requires a large income to start and maintain this way of life. Such a position undermines the real benefit of minimalist living, which is that it allows us to achieve our baseline happiness or contentment without the weight of extreme wealth or status, and with the least amount of resources possible. However, given that the prevailing consumerist culture in which we live holds that more is more and less is less, this idea is challenging to accept. This is entirely related to the way that we as a society value social status, and the things one owns, drives, lives in, owns furniture of, and dresses in determine one's social standing rather than virtue or spirituality. Our status in the hierarchy of dominance appears to be determined by what we possess. Hence, those who dare to reject these sacred elements will be viewed as heretics in a society where holiness is wealth, the church is the mall, and prayer is consumption. However, there are times when the benefits of living simply far exceed the drawbacks. The pleasures of not being emperor Yao respected the reclusive Xu Yu so much that he was prepared to cede his throne to him. But Xu Yu, who led a solitary and peaceful life by the river, declined, telling the emperor that he didn't need everything under heaven and that the tailor bird uses no more than one branch when she builds her nest in the deep wood. An old Chinese book credited to the Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi contains the tale of Xu Yu. A whole empire under his command is something that many can only dream of, and it is given to the poor recluse. However, the narrative informs us that he made the decision to live alone as a hermit. Xu Yu have probably come to the realization that great power carries with it great responsibility, and that he cannot lead a quiet, simple life as the ruler of an empire. You can lose less and have less to worry about the less you own. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu wrote the following passage, which I will quote: "If you overvalue possessions, people will start stealing. Keep your treasures hidden to avoid making people jealous." Close quote. Having a large collection of belongings calls for sufficient security. For this reason, we observe that ostensibly wealthy individuals frequently hide behind walls in gated communities, living in fear. On the other hand, we save a great deal of time and energy by owning little. Our expensive possessions don't need to be maintained, and they also don't divert our attention. Furthermore, since we don't have to possess the things we like, we can still find happiness in the world. When we can take a stroll through the woods, why do we need a 1,000-square-foot garden? Why do we need a 6-bedroom mansion when we can live in a modest little home and spend no money exploring the outdoors? Henry David Thoreau, the American transcendentalist philosopher, must have also considered this before deciding to move into a cabin in the woods close to the Walden Pond. Thoreau made a conscious decision to live a simple life because he thought it could promote spiritual development. To put it simply, living simply promotes serenity. Low living expenses free us from working like dogs and allow us to spend more time indulging in the wonderful things in our environment. Isn't that the main purpose of freedom? Identifying our requirements. What then do we actually need? Where is the ideal route that a minimalist seeks to find that strikes a balance between materialism and austerity? Numerous philosophers throughout history have contributed to the development of the minimalist lifestyle in their own special ways. Consider Diogenes the Cynic, who was penniless and lived in a barrel. According to the story, he had a drinking cup for a while. One day, he noticed a child drinking from his hands, so he threw it away and said, "A child has beaten me in plainness of living." Apart from that, Diogenes was shameless and indifferent to the opinions of others. He was unteachable because of his disassociation from material possessions and the opinions of others. Nobody could ever harm him. However, there is a more workable method of minimalist living that was developed by the philosopher Epicurus for those who would prefer to live a more integrated life without becoming an outcast. This method is for those who don't want to live in a barrel on the streets. Epicurus developed a hierarchy of needs that helps us distinguish between the kinds of desires we should and shouldn't pursue. The things we should prioritize are basic needs and natural desires like food, shelter, and interpersonal relationships. These innate wants are also satiable because they have natural boundaries and are typically simple to satisfy. He referred to the aspirations that we ought to shun as vain and empty, and they include fame, fortune, and power. He believed that because these desires have no natural limit, they are unnecessary, unnatural, and impossible to satisfy. Epicurus now exhorts us to quit dwelling on our shortcomings and to appreciate what we already have. Alternatively, as he put it, remember that what you have now was once among the things you only hoped for. Do not spoil what you have by desiring what you have not. True wealth comes from letting go. Possessing little brings immense happiness. Unlike the lives of those who aim to consume indefinitely, sacrificing everything in order to feel better about themselves and feel accepted in a society where our value is determined by the possessions we own. This is the epitome of an unhappy existence for a minimalist. Giving up on traditional notions of wealth and status, minimalism recognizes that real wealth is internal and that social status is not only a needless luxury but also a difficult to achieve, easily lost, and for the most part, uncontrollable factor. Rather, minimalists opt for a simple, easy life because they understand that true wealth is found in being able to let go of all these material possessions and in experiencing the joy of living simply. They consider simplicity to be the height of sophistication. To maintain oneself on this earth is not a hardship, but rather a pastime if we live simply and wisely, as Thoreau said, both by faith and experience. I appreciate you viewing.